Right now, as you watch this video, you believe you're making a conscious choice. You think you decided to click play, you think you're in control of your attention, and you think you understand why you do what you do. But what if I told you that every decision you've made today, every emotion you've felt, every reaction you've had to other people, has been governed by invisible laws that you've never been taught? What if the reason you keep making the same mistakes in relationships, the reason you get triggered by certain people, the reason you sometimes sabotage your own success, isn't because you're flawed or weak, but because you're operating blind to the fundamental forces that drive all human behavior? Robert Greene spent over 6 years studying history's most successful and most destructive individuals to decode these hidden patterns. What he discovered will shatter everything you think you know about yourself and others. These aren't feel-good theories or motivational platitudes. These are the actual operating instructions for the human mind, and once you see them, you can never unsee them. The person you were when you started watching this video will not be the person who finishes it. This is your warning and your invitation. The book we're about to dissect is The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. This isn't just another self-help book. This is the user manual for human consciousness that you never received. While everyone else is stumbling through life reactive and confused by their own emotions and the behavior of others, you're about to gain extra vision into the deepest motivations that drive every human interaction. You see, most people live their entire lives as prisoners of patterns they don't understand. They wonder why they keep attracting the same toxic relationships. They can't figure out why they procrastinate on their biggest dreams. They're baffled by their own emotional reactions and feel helpless when others manipulate or disappoint them. But human nature isn't random. It follows laws as predictable as gravity. And just like understanding gravity allows you to build skyscrapers that defy it, understanding these laws allows you to transcend the limitations that keep most people trapped in cycles of frustration and mediocrity. Over the next 2 hours, we're not just going to summarize a book, we're going to perform surgery on your consciousness. We're going to remove the blindfold you've been wearing your entire life and show you the invisible threads that control human behavior. By the end of this journey, you'll possess a superpower that less than 1% of people ever develop: the ability to see people as they truly are, including yourself. This is your invitation to join the ranks of those who understand. Let's begin your transformation. We're about to embark on an 18-chapter journey through the deepest territories of human psychology. Each chapter reveals a fundamental law that governs how people think, feel, and behave. In Chapter 1, we'll discover why your emotions are sabotaging your success and how to become the master of your inner world instead of its victim. Chapter 2 will expose the narcissist in everyone, including yourself, and teach you to transform self-obsession into genuine empathy. Chapter 3 reveals how to see through the masks people wear and discover who they really are underneath. We'll learn to read character like a book in Chapter 4, become irresistibly attractive in Chapter 5, and develop the long-term vision that creates lasting success in Chapter 6. Chapter 7 teaches the art of influence without resistance, while Chapter 8 shows you how to stop being your own worst enemy. The journey gets deeper as we confront our shadow in Chapter 9, learn to handle envy in Chapter 10, and recognize the dangerous delusions of grandiosity in Chapter 11. Chapter 12 helps you integrate your masculine and feminine energies, while Chapter 13 gives you unshakable purpose. The final chapters take us into the realm of group dynamics and leadership, showing you how to resist conformity in Chapter 14, inspire fierce loyalty in Chapter 15, handle aggression in Chapter 16. We'll explore generational patterns in Chapter 17, before reaching the ultimate chapter on mortality and meaning in Chapter 18. This isn't just intellectual knowledge. Each law contains the power to fundamentally alter how you experience life. Let's dive in, one transformation at a time. Chapter 1. Master your emotional self, the law of irrationality. Think you're a rational person? Think again. Right now, your decisions are being hijacked by emotional forces you're not even aware of. The most successful people in history weren't more intelligent than everyone else. They were more emotionally intelligent. They understood that emotions don't just influence our decisions, they are our decisions, dressed up in rational-sounding explanations after the fact. Here's the brutal truth. You are not the rational, logical being you think you are. You're an emotional creature using logic to justify what you've already decided to feel. Every day you make dozens of choices based on fear, desire, anger, or insecurity. Then create elaborate reasons why those choices were smart or necessary. Consider your last major life decision. Maybe it was a career change, a relationship choice, or a significant purchase. Now be honest. Did you make that decision through careful analysis? Or did you feel something first and then gather evidence to support what you already wanted to do? The feeling came first, didn't it? This is the law of irrationality in action. We are all, every single one of us, fundamentally irrational beings. But here's where it gets interesting. The people who acknowledge this about themselves gain tremendous power over those who don't. When you accept that you're driven by emotion, you can start to observe your emotional patterns. You can catch yourself before making decisions from fear or anger. You can recognize when others are in emotional states and adjust your approach accordingly. You become the chess player while everyone else remains the chess piece. The most dangerous people are those who believe they're purely rational because they're blind to their own emotional drivers. They're easy to manipulate and impossible to reason with because they don't realize they're operating from feeling, not fact. Your activation step for this chapter is simple but powerful. For the next 24 hours, before making any decision, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Don't judge it, don't try to change it, just observe it. Notice how often your emotions are actually running the show. But recognizing your irrationality is just the beginning. Because once you see how emotions control behavior, you'll start noticing something else. How other people's emotional needs are driving everything they do. And that leads us to a particularly dangerous emotional need that destroys more relationships and careers than any other force on earth. Chapter 2. Transform self-love into empathy. The law of narcissism. You know that person who makes everything about themselves, who can't listen to your problems without immediately sharing their own? Who seems incapable of seeing situations from any perspective but their own? Here's the uncomfortable truth. That person is you, and it's me, and it's everyone. We are all narcissists. Every single human being is fundamentally self-absorbed, and this isn't a character flaw to be ashamed of. It's a survival mechanism that kept our species alive. The problem isn't that we're self-focused. The problem is that most people don't realize they are, which makes them insufferable and ineffective. The law of narcissism states that we naturally see everything through the lens of our own needs, fears, and desires. When someone tells you about their promotion, your first thought isn't, I'm so happy for them. It's, what does this mean for me? When you're in an argument, you're not trying to understand the other person's perspective. You're gathering ammunition for your own position. This shows up everywhere. In meetings, people aren't listening to understand. They're waiting for their turn to speak. In relationships, partners talk past each other because each person is focused on being understood rather than understanding. In sales, amateur salespeople talk about their product features instead of their customers' problems. But here's the breakthrough. The moment you acknowledge your own narcissism, you gain the power to transcend it. When you realize that everyone else is also trapped in their own self-focused bubble, you can do something revolutionary. You can step into their world. True empathy isn't feeling bad for someone. True empathy is the ability to temporarily set aside your own perspective and genuinely understand how someone else sees their situation. This is incredibly rare, which makes it incredibly powerful. When you're the one person in the room who actually understands what others need and want, you become irresistible. People will be drawn to you without understanding why. They'll trust you faster, listen to you more readily, and give you opportunities that others don't get. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you. Not just waited for their turn to talk, but actually understood your perspective and responded to what you needed to hear. How did that feel? How did you feel about that person? That's the power you gain when you transform narcissism into empathy. Your activation step. Identify one person in your life who you struggle to understand. Instead of focusing on why they're wrong or difficult, spend 5 minutes genuinely trying to see the world through their eyes. What are they afraid of? What do they need? What would make them feel secure and valued? But empathy alone isn't enough, because people don't just have needs, they have personas. They present carefully crafted versions of themselves to the world, and if you want to truly understand someone, you need to see past their performance to who they really are underneath. Chapter 3. See through people's masks. The law of role-playing. Everyone you meet is an actor, and life is their stage. The confident colleague, the devoted spouse, the rebellious teenager, the wise mentor. These are all roles people play, and most of the time, they're not even aware they're performing. The law of role-playing reveals that we all develop personas to navigate social situations and protect our vulnerable core selves. These masks aren't necessarily deceptive. They often represent who we aspire to be or who we think we need to be to survive and succeed. But here's what most people miss: the gap between someone's persona and their authentic self contains all the information you need to truly understand them. The bigger the gap, the more internal conflict they're experiencing. The more rigid their role, the more fragile they actually are underneath. Watch how people present themselves in different contexts. The authoritative manager who becomes submissive around their own boss. The social media influencer whose online confidence disappears in face-to-face conversations. The tough guy who melts around children or animals. These aren't contradictions, they're clues. People's true character emerges in 3 specific situations: when they're under stress, when they think no one important is watching, and when they're around people they perceive as having less power than them. Pay attention to how someone treats waiters, how they behave in traffic, how they respond when things don't go their way. The most dangerous people are those whose public persona is dramatically different from their private reality. The charming leader who's ruthless behind closed doors. The spiritual guru who's manipulative in personal relationships. The family man who's predatory when he thinks he can get away with it. But you can also use this understanding compassionately. When you see that someone's aggression is actually fear, that their arrogance covers insecurity, that their withdrawal masks a deep need for connection, you can respond to their authentic self rather than their performed self. This changes everything. Instead of being frustrated by people's surface behaviors, you start seeing the human being underneath. Instead of taking their masks personally, you recognize them as protective strategies. Instead of being manipulated by false personas, you see through to their true motivations. Your activation exercise. Choose someone whose behavior has been puzzling or frustrating to you. Look for the gap between how they present themselves and who they really are. What role are they playing, and what are they trying to protect or achieve through that role? Understanding people's masks is crucial, but it's not enough to see through their personas. You need to understand the deeper patterns that drive their behavior consistently over time. You need to read their character. Chapter 4. Determine the strength of people's character. The law of compulsive behavior. Character isn't what people say about themselves or what they promise to do. Character is what people actually do when faced with temptation, pressure, and opportunity. And here's the thing about character: it's remarkably consistent. People don't suddenly become different people in different situations. They reveal who they've always been. The law of compulsive behavior tells us that everyone has deep patterns that govern their actions, especially under stress. These patterns were formed early in life and reinforced through years of repetition. Understanding someone's core patterns gives you predictive power over their future behavior. Some people are compulsively honest, even when lying would benefit them. Others are compulsively deceptive, even about trivial matters. Some people consistently take responsibility for problems. Others consistently blame external circumstances. Some people naturally think long-term. Others are trapped in immediate gratification. These aren't occasional behaviors. These are default settings that show up again and again throughout a person's life. The person who cheated on their taxes will likely cut corners in other areas. The person who's consistently late is communicating something about how they value other people's time. The person who gossips to you about others will eventually gossip about you to someone else. But character isn't just about moral qualities. It's about deeper patterns of how people approach challenges, relationships, and opportunities. Some people are natural builders who create systems and infrastructure. Others are natural breakers who tear down existing structures. Some people thrive in chaos. Others need stability and predictability. The most important character trait to identify is someone's relationship with power. How do they behave when they have power over others? How do they respond when others have power over them? Do they abuse authority or use it responsibly? Do they become submissive or maintain their dignity when in subordinate positions? Watch people carefully during transitions and crises. These moments strip away the superficial and reveal core character. How someone handles a promotion, a setback, a conflict, or an unexpected opportunity tells you everything you need to know about who they really are. Your activation step. Think of 3 people you interact with regularly. For each person, identify their most consistent behavioral pattern. What do they do repeatedly, regardless of the specific situation? How can understanding this pattern help you interact with them more effectively? Once you understand character patterns, you gain something even more valuable: the ability to make yourself irresistibly attractive by understanding what people truly desire and why they want what they can't have. Chapter 5. Become an elusive object of desire. The law of covetousness. Human beings don't want what they can easily have. They want what seems just out of reach. They desire what others possess. They crave what appears scarce, exclusive, or forbidden. This isn't shallow or materialistic. This is how the human mind has always worked. Understanding this gives you tremendous power in every area of life. The law of covetousness reveals that desire isn't based on objective value. It's based on perceived scarcity and social proof. Same item, person. Or opportunity can seem worthless when it's freely available and irresistible when it appears limited or difficult to obtain. Think about your own desires. The job you wanted desperately when you thought you might not get it. The person who became more attractive after they showed less interest in you is the product you had to have after you heard there was a waiting list. Your desire wasn't really about the object itself, it was about the chase, the challenge, the status of having something others couldn't get. This pattern shows up everywhere. In business, companies create artificial scarcity through limited editions and exclusive access. In dating, the most attractive people are often those who seem slightly unattainable. In social situations, the person everyone wants to talk to is usually the one who appears selective about their company. But here's the key insight. You can ethically apply this law to make yourself more valuable and attractive in any context. Not through manipulation or game playing, but by genuinely becoming someone worth pursuing. In your career, instead of being available for every project and saying yes to every request, become known for high standards and selective involvement. People will want your participation more when they're not sure they can get it. In relationships, maintain your own interests, goals, and social life instead of becoming completely absorbed in your partner. The healthiest relationships involve complete individuals choosing to be together, not to have trying to become whole. In social situations, be genuinely interested in others, but also be someone with your own compelling life and pursuits. People are drawn to those who seem to have something valuable going on that they're not fully revealing. The dark side of this law is that some people create artificial scarcity through game playing, withholding, and emotional manipulation. But the light side is becoming genuinely valuable, genuinely selective, and genuinely worth pursuing. Your activation exercise. Identify one area of your life where you've been too available or too eager. How can you create healthy boundaries and standards that make your time, attention, or involvement more valuable? But desire without direction leads to chaos. To truly master your life and relationships, you need to develop something most people lack entirely: the ability to think and plan beyond immediate gratification. Chapter 6. Elevate your perspective. The law of short-sightedness. Most people live their lives like they're driving at night with their headlights on dim. They can see just far enough ahead to avoid immediate obstacles, but they're completely blind to what's coming around the next curve. This short-sightedness destroys more dreams, relationships, and opportunities than any other single factor. The law of short-sightedness reveals that humans are biologically wired to focus on immediate concerns at the expense of long-term consequences. We evolved to survive day-to-day dangers, not to plan for abstract future outcomes. But in the modern world, this ancient programming is our biggest liability. See this everywhere. People choose pleasure today over health tomorrow. They prioritize looking good in meetings over building genuine competence. They make decisions based on how they feel right now, rather than considering how they'll feel about those decisions in 6 months or 6 years. The most successful people in any field share one common trait. They've learned to extend their time horizon. They make decisions based on where they want to be, not where they are. They sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term advantage. They plant trees they may never sit under. But elevated perspective isn't just about time, it's about scope. Most people see only their immediate situation. They focus on their own problems, their own industry, their own circle of friends. People with elevated perspectives see patterns across different domains. They understand how changes in technology, culture, and economics will create new opportunities and threats. This broader view allows them to anticipate trends, position themselves advantageously, and make moves that seem mysterious to others but prove brilliant in retrospect. While everyone else is reacting to changes after they happen, these individuals are positioning themselves to benefit from changes before they occur. Consider the decisions you're making right now in your career, relationships, and personal development. Are you optimizing for how things are today, or for how they're likely to be in the future? Are you solving immediate problems, or building systems that will prevent problems from occurring? The person who learns new skills before they're required gets promoted. The person who builds relationships before they need them has opportunities others don't. The person who saves money before emergencies has options others lack. Your activation step. Identify 3 major decisions you need to make in the next 6 months. For each decision, ask yourself, if I knew how this would look in 5 years, what would I choose? Then make decisions based on your long-term vision, not your short-term feelings. But even the best long-term plans fail if you can't get people on board with your vision. Most people resist change, even positive change, and if you try to force new ideas on them, they'll fight you every step of the way. Unless you understand their next law. Chapter 7. Soften people's resistance by confirming their self-opinion. The law of defensiveness. Every person you meet is walking around with an invisible force field designed to protect their ego and self-image. This defensive barrier is so powerful that it can deflect facts, logic, and even opportunities that would clearly benefit them. Try to penetrate this defense directly. You'll trigger a fight-or-flight response that makes productive communication impossible. The law of defensiveness reveals that people's need to maintain their self-image is stronger than their need to be right, successful, or even happy. They will reject good advice, defend bad decisions, and resist positive changes if those changes threaten their sense of who they are. Think about the last time someone criticized something you cared about or suggested you were wrong about something important. Your first instinct wasn't to consider whether they might be right. Your first instinct was to defend yourself, to explain why they didn't understand, to find flaws in their argument. This happened before you even consciously evaluated what they were saying. This is why most attempts at persuasion fail. People try to convince others through logic, evidence, and passionate arguments, not realizing they're essentially attacking the other person's identity. The stronger their argument, the stronger the defensive response they trigger. But there's a way around this barrier, and it's counterintuitive. Instead of challenging people's self-image, you confirm it. You find genuine ways to acknowledge their intelligence, their good intentions, their expertise. You make them feel seen and validated before you introduce any new ideas. Master influencers understand that people have to feel right about who they are before they can be open to being wrong about what they think. So they start by finding common ground, by acknowledging the other person's perspective, by showing respect for their experience and judgment. This isn't manipulation, it's emotional intelligence. You're recognizing that people are complex beings with deep needs for respect and validation, not just logic machines waiting to process your arguments. In practical terms, this means leading with phrases like, "You obviously know more about this than I do, so help me understand," or "I can see why someone with your experience would think that," or "You've clearly thought this through carefully." You're not lying or being fake, you're acknowledging their humanity before engaging their intellect. Your activation exercise. Think of someone who typically resists your ideas or becomes defensive in conversations with you next time you interact with them. Start by genuinely acknowledging something positive about their perspective or approach before introducing any new information. But sometimes the biggest resistance you face isn't from other people, it's from yourself. And the most destructive form of self-resistance is so subtle that most people don't even realize they're doing it. Chapter 8. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. The law of self-sabotage. You are your own worst enemy. Right now, as you're listening to this, there are probably 3 to 5 ways you're unconsciously undermining your own success, happiness, and potential. And the most insidious part is that you're doing it while telling yourself you want to succeed. The law of self-sabotage reveals that we all have internal programs running in the background that protect us from success, love, and achievement because some part of us believes we don't deserve them or can't handle them. These programs show up as procrastination, perfectionism, picking fights with people who could help us, or creating chaos just when things start going well. Self-sabotage isn't a character flaw, it's a protective mechanism. Deep down, some part of you believes that success would be dangerous. Maybe you learned early that achievement leads to isolation, that standing out brings criticism, that having more means others have less. Maybe you're afraid that if you really tried and still failed, you'd have to face painful truths about your limitations. So instead of risking that pain, you create subtle ways to ensure you never have to find out how good you could actually be. You show up late to important meetings. You don't prepare for opportunities you claim to want. You sabotage relationships just when they're getting serious. You abandon projects right before they could succeed. The cruel irony is that this self-protection causes the very pain it's trying to prevent. By avoiding the risk of failure, you guarantee a kind of failure. By protecting yourself from potential rejection, you reject yourself first. But here's the breakthrough. Your attitude toward your circumstances has more impact on your outcomes than the circumstances themselves. Two people can face identical challenges and have completely different results based on how they interpret and respond to their situation. The person who sees obstacles as evidence they're not meant to succeed gives up quickly. The person who sees obstacles as normal parts of any worthwhile journey finds ways around them. The person who believes they're a victim of circumstances feels powerless. The person who believes they're the author of their story takes responsibility and action. Your circumstances aren't fixed realities, they're raw materials. The same setback can be either devastating evidence of your inadequacy or valuable feedback that redirects you toward a better approach. The same criticism can either crush your confidence or provide crucial information about how to improve. Your activation step. Identify one area of your life where you keep getting results you don't want. Look honestly at how your own attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors might be contributing to these outcomes. What would change if you took complete responsibility for improving this situation? Taking responsibility for your results is empowering, but it also means facing parts of yourself you'd rather not see. And that brings us to perhaps the most important law of all. Chapter 9. Confront your dark side. The law of repression. You have a shadow. Right now, as you present yourself as a good, rational, well-intentioned person, there's a part of you that's petty, selfish, aggressive, and destructive. You've spent your entire life trying to hide this part from others and from yourself, but it hasn't disappeared. It's just gone underground, where it controls you in ways you don't even realize. The law of repression tells us that whatever we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves doesn't vanish. It simply operates outside our conscious awareness. The anger you won't admit to feeling comes out as passive aggression. The neediness you're ashamed of shows up as people-pleasing. The power hunger you deny manifests as subtle manipulation. Everyone has aspects of their personality they consider unacceptable. Maybe you pride yourself on being nice, so you refuse to acknowledge your capacity for cruelty. Maybe you see yourself as independent, so you deny your deep need for approval. Maybe you think of yourself as humble, so you ignore your grandiose fantasies. But these repressed qualities don't just affect you, they affect everyone around you. The people who trigger you most strongly are usually reflecting back qualities you refuse to see in yourself. The behaviors that disgust you in others are often behaviors you're capable of, but won't admit to. This is why self-righteous people are often hiding the very sins they condemn in others. The politician who campaigns on family values while having affairs, the religious leader who preaches humility while being narcissistic, the activist who fights inequality while treating subordinates poorly. But here's the paradox. The parts of yourself you're most afraid to acknowledge are often the sources of your greatest potential power. Your capacity for anger properly channeled becomes the energy needed to change unjust situations. Your selfishness acknowledged and integrated becomes healthy self-care and boundary setting. Your manipulative tendencies owned and directed become sophisticated social intelligence. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow, it's to integrate it consciously. When you acknowledge all aspects of your personality, you gain access to your full range of human capabilities. You become more authentic, more powerful, and paradoxically, more genuinely good, because your goodness becomes a choice rather than a desperate attempt to hide from your darkness. Your activation exercise. Identify 3 qualities in other people that trigger strong negative reactions in you. Ask yourself honestly, How might these qualities exist in yourself, even in subtle or socially acceptable forms? What would change if you acknowledged these aspects instead of denying them? Integrating your shadow takes courage. But there's another emotional force that's even more destructive and much more common in our achievement-oriented culture. Chapter 10. Beware the fragile ego, the law of envy. Envy is the most toxic emotion in human experience, and it's everywhere. It masquerades as moral outrage, justified criticism, and principled opposition, but underneath, it's pure poison. And here's the disturbing truth. You feel it more often than you want to admit, and others feel it toward you more than you realize. The law of envy reveals that people don't just want success, they want others to fail. So they don't just want to be happy, they want to be happier than their peers. This isn't conscious malice. It's an ancient survival mechanism that helped our ancestors compete for limited resources. But in the modern world, it destroys relationships, careers, and communities. Envy is different from admiration or healthy competition. When you admire someone, you want to learn from them and achieve similar success. When you feel healthy competition, you're motivated to improve your own performance. But when you feel envy, you want the other person to lose what they have. You want their success diminished, their happiness tainted, their advantages removed. You can see this everywhere. It's a friend who seems happy for your promotion, but starts pointing out all the ways your new job will be stressful. The colleague who congratulates you on your achievement while subtly undermining your contribution. The family member who celebrates your success to your face, but gossips about your failures behind your back. Envy is particularly dangerous because it's often disguised as virtue. People convince themselves they're motivated by fairness, justice, or concern for others when they're actually motivated by resentment that someone else has what they want. But here's what makes envy so destructive to the person feeling it. It's based on comparison rather than gratitude. The envious person can never be satisfied, because there will always be someone who has more, looks better, seems happier, or appears more successful. They rob themselves of the ability to appreciate their own achievements and advantages. If you want to identify envy in others, look for people who seem to take pleasure in bad news about successful individuals. Watch for those who always have reasons why other people's achievements don't really count. Notice who brings up others' failures or problems when their successes are being discussed. Protecting yourself from others' envy requires strategic awareness. Don't flaunt your advantages unnecessarily. Share your struggles, along with your successes. Give credit generously to others. Make people feel valuable and included, rather than diminished by your achievements. Your activation step. Examine your own reactions to others' success over the past month. When did you feel genuine happiness for someone else's achievement? And when did you feel something more complicated? What triggers envious feelings in you, and how can you transform that energy into motivation for your own growth? Envy often stems from a deeper problem that affects high achievers more than anyone else. The dangerous delusion that you're special, chosen, and destined for greatness beyond ordinary human limitations. Chapter 11. Know your limits. The law of grandiosity. You think you're more special than you are? Right now, despite any humility you might express publicly, there's a part of you that believes you're different from everyone else, that normal rules don't apply to you, that you're destined for something greater than the ordinary lives of ordinary people. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it becomes dangerous when it disconnects you from reality. The law of grandiosity reveals that we all have inflated opinions of our own abilities, intelligence, and importance. This inflation serves a psychological function. It protects us from the anxiety of recognizing how small and powerless we actually are in the vast scheme of existence. But when grandiosity goes unchecked, it leads to spectacular failures and devastating blindness. Grandiose thinking shows up in subtle ways. You assume your first business idea will be the exception to high failure rates. You believe your relationship will beat the divorce statistics because your love is different. You think you can master complex skills faster than others because you're naturally gifted. You imagine you can ignore proven principles because you've found a better way. This isn't just overconfidence. It's a disconnection from reality that makes learning impossible. When you believe you're already exceptional, you stop listening to feedback, ignore warning signs, and dismiss advice from people who've actually succeeded in the areas where you're still struggling. The most dangerous form of grandiosity is moral grandiosity, the belief that you're morally superior to others. that your intentions are pure while others are corrupt, that your cause justifies methods you would condemn in anyone else. This leads to the kind of self-righteous behavior that destroys relationships and communities. But grandiosity isn't always obvious. Sometimes it shows up as its opposite. A kind of grandiose humility where you believe your problems are more complex. Your pain is deeper. Your struggles are more meaningful than anyone else's. You become special through suffering rather than success. But you're still positioning yourself as fundamentally different from ordinary humans? The antidote to grandiosity isn't self-hatred or false modesty. It's realistic self-assessment combined with genuine humility. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking about yourself less. It means recognizing that you're subject to the same psychological laws, emotional patterns, and human limitations as everyone else. When you accept your ordinariness, you gain access to extraordinary power. You can learn from others because you don't assume you already know better. You can follow proven principles because you don't think you're the exception. You can accept help because you don't need to maintain an image of invincibility. Your activation exercise. Identify 3 areas where you might be thinking grandiose thoughts about your abilities or specialness. What would change if you approached these areas with the assumption that you're subject to the same limitations and learning curves as everyone else? Accepting your human limitations is liberating. But there's another form of limitation that's artificially imposed and unnecessarily restrictive. The rigid gender roles that prevent you from accessing your full range of human capabilities. Chapter 12. Reconnect to the masculine or feminine within you. The law of gender rigidity. You are not half a person. Whether you're male or female, you possess both masculine and feminine energies, qualities, and capabilities. But somewhere along the way, you learn to suppress one side of your nature to fit social expectations. The suppression is costing you tremendous power and wholeness. The law of gender rigidity reveals that we all contain both assertive and receptive qualities, both logical and intuitive capabilities, both competitive and collaborative instincts. The healthiest and most successful individuals learn to access both sets of qualities as situations require. Rather than limiting themselves to narrow gender stereotypes, traditional masculine energy includes qualities like assertiveness, logical analysis, goal-oriented action, competitive drive, and protective instincts. Traditional feminine energy includes qualities like intuition, emotional intelligence, collaborative communication, nurturing care, and receptive awareness. But here's the crucial insight. These aren't male or female qualities. They're human qualities. Every person needs both sets of capabilities to navigate life effectively. The man who can only be assertive, but never receptive, misses crucial information and damages relationships. The woman who can only be collaborative, but never assertive, gets overlooked and taken advantage of. In our current culture, many men have been taught to suppress their emotional intelligence, intuition, and collaborative instincts, leaving them isolated and unable to form deep connections. Many women have been taught to suppress their assertiveness, logical analysis, and competitive drive, leaving them unable to advocate for themselves effectively. This rigid separation creates unnecessary limitations and internal conflicts. You end up fighting against parts of your own nature instead of integrating them into a more complete and powerful version of yourself. The most effective leaders combine traditionally masculine decisiveness with traditionally feminine emotional intelligence. The most successful entrepreneurs balance masculine drive with feminine intuition about what people really need. The strongest relationships involve partners who can both assert their needs and receptively understand their partner's perspective. Think about the most impressive people you know. They probably don't fit neatly into gender stereotypes. The powerful woman who can also be gentle and nurturing. The strong man who's also emotionally intelligent and collaborative. They've learned to access their full range of human capabilities rather than limiting themselves to half their potential. Your activation step. Identify which set of qualities you've been taught to suppress or avoid. If you're naturally assertive, practice receptive listening and collaborative problem solving. If you're naturally collaborative, practice direct communication and competitive goal setting. Notice how accessing these suppressed qualities enhances rather than diminishes your effectiveness. But even with access to your full range of capabilities, you still need something to direct all that energy toward. Without clear purpose, even the most capable people end up scattered, frustrated, and ultimately ineffective. Chapter 13. Advance with a sense of purpose. The law of aimlessness. Most people are wandering through life without any real direction, reacting to circumstances rather than creating them, following paths chosen by others rather than forging their own way. They mistake being busy for being purposeful, confuse having goals with having direction, and wonder why their achievements feel empty even when they succeed. The law of aimlessness reveals that without a clear sense of purpose, all your talents, efforts, and opportunities become scattered and ineffective. Purpose isn't just about having ambitions or dreams. It's about having a unifying direction that gives meaning to your daily choices and connects your individual actions to something larger than immediate gratification. Real purpose has three components. It's personally meaningful to you. It serves something beyond your own immediate needs, and it requires you to grow into the person capable of achieving it. Without all three elements, what you think is purpose is actually just sophisticated goal setting or disguised self-interest. Purpose provides the filter that helps you say no to opportunities that seem attractive but don't serve your deeper direction. It gives you resilience during difficult periods because you understand why the struggle is worthwhile. It attracts the right people and opportunities because clear purpose is magnetic to others who share similar values. But here's what most people get wrong about purpose. They think they need to discover it, as if it's hidden somewhere waiting to be found. In reality, purpose is created through the intersection of your natural strengths, your deepest values, and the world's pressing needs. It emerges from action and experimentation, not from meditation and soul-searching alone. The people with the strongest sense of purpose didn't wait until they felt certain about their direction. They started moving toward what interested them most, paid attention to what energized them, noticed where they could make a unique contribution, and gradually refined their path based on real-world feedback. Your sense of purpose will evolve as you do. It's the purpose that drives you in your 20s. May be different from what motivates you in your 40s or 60s. The key is to always have some version of purpose operating in your life. Some direction that's bigger than just getting through the day or accumulating more stuff. Without purpose, you become vulnerable to manipulation by others who do have clear agendas. You drift toward whatever seems easiest or most immediately rewarding. You end up serving other people's purposes by default rather than creating and serving your own. Your activation exercise. Write down 3 activities or causes that consistently energize you. 3 natural strengths you possess, and 3 problems in the world that genuinely concern you. Look for patterns and connections between these lists. What emerges when you combine what you're good at, what you care about, and what the world needs? Having personal purpose is essential, but you don't live in isolation. You're part of groups, communities, and cultures that have their own agendas and pressures. And these collective forces can either support your individual purpose or completely undermine it. Chapter 14. Resist the downward pull of the group. The law of conformity. Right now, you think you're making independent choices, but the groups you belong to are shaping your thoughts, emotions, and decisions in ways you don't even recognize. Your family, friends, colleagues, and broader culture are all exerting subtle pressure on you to think and behave in certain ways. And most of the time, that pressure pulls you toward mediocrity rather than excellence. The law of conformity reveals that humans are biologically wired to sync up with the groups around them. This was essential for survival when we lived in small tribes, but in the modern world, it often prevents us from thinking clearly, making optimal decisions, and reaching our full potential. Group conformity shows up everywhere. Meetings where everyone goes along with the loudest voice rather than thinking independently. In social situations where you modify your opinions based on what seems acceptable to the crowd. In career choices where you follow conventional paths rather than exploring what might actually fulfill you. The most insidious form of conformity is emotional conformity. Groups don't just influence what you think, they influence what you feel. If your social circle is generally pessimistic, you'll find yourself becoming more negative. If your workplace culture is cynical, you'll start adopting cynical attitudes. If your family system is based on drama and crisis, you'll unconsciously create drama in your own life. But resisting group pressure doesn't mean becoming antisocial or contrarian. It means developing the ability to think independently while still maintaining healthy relationships. It means being willing to hold unpopular opinions when your analysis suggests they're correct. It means making choices based on your own values and long-term vision, rather than social approval. The people who achieve extraordinary results are almost always willing to be temporarily misunderstood or criticized by their peer groups. They pursue opportunities others dismiss as risky or unrealistic. They invest time in developing skills that seem irrelevant to current trends. They make choices that appear strange to others, but make perfect sense from their elevated perspective. This requires tremendous psychological strength, because humans are deeply social creatures who suffer real pain from social isolation or disapproval. But the alternative is worse: a life of comfortable mediocrity, where you never discover what you're truly capable of achieving. Your activation step. Identify 3 areas where group pressure might be influencing your choices, in ways that don't serve your long-term interests. What would you do differently if you only had to answer to your future self rather than your current social circle? Resisting negative group influence is crucial, but eventually, you'll want to create positive group influence. You'll want to inspire others to follow your vision, support your goals, and contribute to purposes that matter to you. But leadership isn't what most people think it is. Chapter 15. Make them want to follow you. The law of fickleness. People are fickle. The same individuals who cheer for you today will turn against you tomorrow if their circumstances or emotions change. The followers who seem devoted to your cause will abandon you the moment a more attractive leader appears. This isn't a character flaw in them, it's human nature. And trying to fight it will only frustrate you and exhaust your energy. The law of fickleness teaches us that true leadership isn't about gaining followers. It's about consistently embodying the qualities that make people want to follow. It's not about getting people to commit to you permanently. It's about being the kind of leader who deserves commitment for as long as that commitment serves everyone involved. Most people approach leadership backwards. They try to get people to follow them first, then work on becoming worthy of that following. But real influence works in the opposite direction. You become someone worth following, and then people naturally gravitate toward you without being asked or convinced. What makes someone worth following? First, competence. People won't follow you long-term if you can't deliver results. Second, consistency. People need to know what to expect from you, especially during difficult periods. Third, vision. People want to be part of something meaningful, not just successful. But here's the crucial insight. The most magnetic leaders understand that they're not trying to get people to serve them. They're trying to serve people's deepest needs for purpose, growth, and contribution. They create environments where others can become their best selves while working toward shared goals. This means accepting that some people will leave your orbit when they outgrow what you have to offer, and that's actually a sign of successful leadership. The goal isn't to create dependency. It's to create value that makes people want to stay as long as the relationship serves everyone involved. The leaders who try to hold on to followers through manipulation, guilt, or artificial scarcity create toxic environments that eventually collapse. The leaders who focus on consistently providing value create sustainable influence that attracts the right people and naturally releases those who are meant to move on. Your activation exercise. Instead of thinking about how to get people to follow you, ask yourself, what value am I providing that makes people's lives better? How am I helping others become more than they could be on their own? Focus on increasing that value rather than increasing your follower count. But leadership involves more than just attracting followers. Sometimes you'll face direct opposition, criticism, and even hostility from people who see you as a threat to their interests or worldview. Understanding how to handle aggression is essential for anyone who wants to lead effectively. Chapter 16. See the hostility behind the friendly facade. The law of aggression. People are more aggressive than they appear, and this aggression is often hidden behind smiles, politeness, and social conventions. The colleague who undermines you while seeming helpful. The friend who consistently takes more than they give while maintaining they care about you. The business partner who pushes their agenda while claiming to want what's best for everyone. The law of aggression reveals that all humans have aggressive impulses. But most people have learned to express these impulses indirectly, rather than confronting others openly. This indirect aggression is often more damaging than direct hostility, because it's harder to identify and defend against. Passive aggression shows up as chronic lateness, selective incompetence, backhanded compliments, and strategic forgetfulness. Manipulative aggression involves guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail, and creating situations where you feel obligated to do what they want. Social aggression includes gossiping, exclusion, and reputation damage disguised as concern or helpful information. The most dangerous people are those who have learned to weaponize kindness and social conventions. They use your politeness against you, your desire to be fair against you, your reluctance to cause conflict against you. They count on your assumption that they mean well, even when their behavior consistently suggests otherwise. Learning to identify hidden aggression requires paying more attention to patterns than to words. Does this person consistently benefit from interactions while you consistently give more than you receive? Do they make requests that seem reasonable individually, but collectively drain your time and energy? Do problems and conflicts seem to follow them wherever they go? Once you identify hidden aggression, you have several options. You can confront it directly, but be prepared for denial and counterattack. You can set clear boundaries and consequences, which often stops the behavior without requiring confrontation. Or you can strategically distance yourself from people whose aggression consistently costs you more than their friendship provides. The key is to respond to people's actual behavior patterns rather than their stated intentions. Someone who consistently acts in ways that harm your interests is being aggressive toward you, regardless of how they explain or justify their actions. Your activation step: identify one person in your life whose behavior consistently creates problems or stress for you, even though they seem well-intentioned. What patterns do you notice when you focus on their actions rather than their explanations? Understanding individual aggression is important, but there are larger forces at work that shape entire generations and cultures. To truly master human nature, you need to understand how historical moments create different types of people with different values and blind spots. Chapter 17. Seize the historical moment. The law of generational myopia. You are not just an individual making personal choices in a vacuum. You're part of a specific generation that was shaped by particular historical events, technological changes, and cultural shifts. These generational influences created assumptions, values, and blind spots that you share with millions of your peers. And recognizing these patterns gives you tremendous strategic advantages. The law of generational myopia reveals that each generation develops a worldview based on the formative experiences they shared during their youth. These worldviews feel like universal truths to the people who hold them, but they're actually historical artifacts that will seem outdated to future generations. Consider the differences between generations alive today. Those who lived through the Great Depression and World War II developed values around frugality, sacrifice, and institutional loyalty. Baby boomers, who grew up during economic expansion and social upheaval, value individual expression and challenging authority. Generation X, raised during economic uncertainty and divorce epidemics, tends toward skepticism and self-reliance. Each generation's strengths become their weaknesses when circumstances change. The institutional loyalty that served the silent generation well in stable career environments became a liability. When companies started prioritizing profits over employee welfare, the questioning attitude that helped boomers create social progress became destructive. When applied to basic facts and expertise, understanding generational patterns allows you to predict cultural trends, anticipate resistance to new ideas, and position yourself advantageously for upcoming changes. When you see which direction different generations are moving, you can prepare for shifts in politics, economics, and social values before they become obvious to everyone else. But generational awareness also helps you avoid the trap of assuming your generation's perspective is the only valid one. Every generation has valuable insights and dangerous blind spots. The key is to learn from other generations' experiences while adapting to current realities rather than fighting changes you can't control. Your activation exercise: identify 3 major historical events or cultural changes that occurred during your youth and shaped your basic assumptions about how the world works, and consider which of these assumptions might need updating based on how the world has changed since then. But there's one reality that transcends all generational differences, cultural variations, and individual circumstances. It's the one truth that every human being must ultimately face, and how you relate to this truth determines everything about how you live. Chapter 18. Meditate on our common mortality. The law of death denial. You are going to die. Not someday in the distant future. Not if you're unlucky. Not unless medical science saves you. You are going to die, and so is everyone you love, and so is everyone you hate, and so is everyone you've never met. Death is the one absolutely certain fact about your existence, and it's the one fact you spend the most energy trying to ignore. The law of death denial reveals that most human behavior is motivated by our desperate attempt to avoid confronting our own mortality. We chase achievements to create the illusion of permanence. We accumulate possessions to feel substantial and lasting. We seek fame to outlive our physical existence. We have children to extend our genetic legacy. We build institutions to create something that will survive us. This isn't necessarily pathological. The desire to transcend death has driven many of humanity's greatest achievements. Art, literature, scientific discoveries, and social progress often emerge from people's attempts to create something meaningful that will outlast their individual lives. But death denial becomes destructive when it prevents us from fully engaging with life as it actually is. When we're so focused on avoiding mortality that we forget to be mortal, and we're so busy building our legacy that we miss the experiences that make life worth living. The paradox is that accepting death makes life more vivid, not less. When you truly internalize that your time is limited, you become more selective about how you spend it. Trivial dramas lose their power over you. Petty conflicts seem absurd. The opinions of people you don't respect become irrelevant. Death acceptance also makes you more compassionate toward others. When you realize that everyone is struggling with the same fundamental anxiety about existence, their defensive behaviors make more sense. Your desperate attempts to feel important or secure become understandable rather than irritating. Most importantly, confronting mortality clarifies what actually matters to you. Stripped of the illusion that you have unlimited time, you can identify your deepest values and most meaningful relationships. You can distinguish between what you genuinely care about and what you've been conditioned to care about by others. Your final activation exercise. Imagine you have exactly 1 year left to live, but you'll remain healthy and capable throughout that year. What would you stop doing immediately? What would you start doing? Who would you spend time with? What would you want to create or contribute? Now ask yourself, why aren't you already making some of these changes? We've journeyed together through 18 fundamental laws that govern human behavior. And if you've truly absorbed these insights, you're no longer the same person who started this video. You've been given X-ray vision into the hidden motivations that drive every human interaction, including your own. You now understand that emotions, not logic, drive all human decisions, and that recognizing your own irrationality gives you power over others who remain blind to theirs. You've seen that everyone is fundamentally self-absorbed, but that transforming your narcissism into genuine empathy makes you irresistible to others. You can now see through the masks people wear to protect their vulnerable cores. You understand that character is revealed through consistent patterns of behavior under pressure. You know how to make yourself an object of desire by creating healthy scarcity and elevated value. You've learned to extend your time horizon beyond immediate gratification, to soften people's resistance by confirming their self-image, and to recognize the subtle ways you sabotage your own success. You understand the importance of integrating your shadow rather than denying it, and you can identify envy in others and in yourself. You've discovered the dangers of grandiose thinking. It's the power of accessing both your masculine and feminine energies, and the necessity of living with clear purpose. You can resist the downward pull of groups while creating positive influence that makes others want to follow you. You've learned to identify hidden aggression, understand generational patterns, and most importantly, to live with conscious awareness of your own mortality as a source of clarity and compassion rather than fear. These aren't just intellectual concepts you've memorized. These are tools that will fundamentally alter how you navigate every relationship, every decision, and every challenge for the rest of your life. You now possess the operating manual for human consciousness that most people never receive. But knowledge without application is just sophisticated entertainment. The real transformation begins when you leave this video and start applying these laws in your actual life. When you catch yourself being irrational and choose consciousness over reaction. When you see through someone's mask and respond to their authentic self rather than their performance. When you recognize your own self-sabotage and choose growth over protection. This is your choice point. You can file these insights away as interesting information and return to your previous patterns. You can use them to become someone fundamentally different. Someone who understands human nature so deeply that you can navigate any social situation, influence any interaction, and create any relationship you desire. The 18 laws of human nature aren't suggestions or theories. They're discoveries about how consciousness actually operates, and they work whether you believe in them or not. But when you understand them and apply them consciously, you gain access to a level of effectiveness and fulfillment that most people never experience. You now have the tools to see clearly, think strategically, and act powerfully. Understand yourself and others at a depth that creates both compassion and capability. You're no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns and emotional reactions. The question isn't whether these laws will operate in your life. They already are. The question is whether you'll use this understanding to create the relationships, achievements, and experiences you actually want, or whether you'll remain unconscious to the forces that shape your reality. If this journey has been valuable to you, if you've experienced even a glimpse of the transformation these insights can create, I invite you to share this understanding with others who are ready for it. Like this video if it's opened your eyes to new possibilities. Leave a comment sharing which law had the biggest impact on your thinking. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring the deeper principles that govern success, relationships, and human potential. But more than anything, use what you've learned. Apply these laws in your real life, with real people, in real situations. Notice how understanding human nature changes your experience of being human. And remember, you now possess knowledge that puts you in the top 1% of people who truly understand how consciousness operates. Use this power wisely. Use it compassionately. And use it to create a life that would be impossible without this understanding. The transformation is complete. The real work begins.